rather than just someone who's got a certain disability. So we hired them. We've got lots of OT students, physio students and stuff. H-E-A-R-T-H-S. And they're really good. Like you meet them first, and they see that you've got a great that's why I like my brother, and he's got a really good simple workout that takes it touch change.
Hi, all those that are joining. We're about to start. When we do get started, can you give me a thumbs up and a like and let me know that you can hear everything okay?
And not just that, I mean, I can still do.
Hi, Jason. Thank you. Hi, Jason McCurry. Thanks for joining us. So we're just about to get started. We've had the couple of minutes warning. Everyone's just getting settled. When we do start, please give me a thumbs up, a like, a comment. Let me know that you can hear it okay, see everything okay. Give me a wave or a hello so I know who's there.
We also have a young male, but we've got a young male OT student that takes them back for 90 hours, yeah. They're pretty good.
Ready to go, guys?
Hi, Em. Good to see you. It's Laura sitting behind the camera, by the way.
Ready, guys? Yeah. All right. All right, everybody. Just as everyone makes their way to their seats, I'll just flag with you a few things coming up. Sometimes the 3 p.m. time slot's not the best, but when you are getting a room for free, you do what you can. I'm happy to say in the new year, going forward, we do have this room in the morning from 9 till noon, so I hope that works better, especially for parents who have to do school pickup. Future sessions won't fully be 3 hours, but that's the gap of time that we'll be working with in the future. Future topics really should be decided by the community. It is a community of practice. It shouldn't be driven by 1 or 2 people. Ideas sort of been discussed with the community so far. Employment, what's the role that sport inclusion, what's the role the sport and rec sector plays across Victoria for employment of people of all abilities? Should we be working with the idea that if you're coachable, of course you're also employable? We've heard from many people in the sector the benefit of mental health, or the benefit of sport and recreation for their own mental health. Some of the sports here do some amazing work in schools, and we're looking at how can we share that across more sports, share that knowledge. And then of course we'll get into autism and related conditions eventually. I wanted to get things going with communication, which was last month. This month all about the NDIS, how we can leverage that. I'll teach everyone what is autism, and you'll have to listen to me for a few hours. I was at the OSTSWIM conference a few weekends ago, and there was 2 ladies who'd been in the field for a very long time as swim teachers, and they were doing an interview in the foyer. And the last question in the interview was, what's the #1 thing you've learned, or what would you tell anyone just entering this as a career within sport? And they said, share your knowledge. Just share it. You can't take it with you. And so that's really the aim of this, is that we've got 5 plus Jack, 5 amazing speakers today. And between them, they are pushing 50 years experience probably. But across this room, if we just do the simple math that everyone's got 10 years experience between 50 people, the power of the community is very strong. Also remember that AAA Play is statewide. Please make sure your sports and offerings are up to date on that so that it can be the go-to resource in the community. Sport Inclusion Festival, I believe the last time it was some ridiculous wind or rain last year, so it was rain, torrential rain. So hoping that we get some better weather this year. So there's not gonna be a community of practice. December 3rd is the Sport Festival, but come on down, check it out, and we'll have some walking, talking meetings instead of sit down like this. One of the things that I think is really great about this forum and this group is that there are people who have been in this field for a very long time, pushing multiple decades, but we also have people that are really fresh and new into this field. And so I think it's important to recognize those people with awards and recognition, a little bit of positive reinforcement. So I'd like to ask Tom Dixon to announce that there's a new award, the Peter Norman Award.
Thanks, Sean. Hi, everyone. Yeah, just wanted to make sure you're aware that for the Victorian Sport Awards for 2018, there's a new award, the Peter Norman Inclusion Award. If anyone's not aware, Peter Norman was the Australian track athlete who took a stand at the 1968 Mexico Olympics and didn't quite receive a lot of recognition while he was still alive. But Vic Sport has recently had Nova Peris, a project supported by the state government. Nova Peris has been working with us and developing some resources around inclusion in sports. So we've added this new award, so I definitely encourage you to make sure you check out the Vic Sports website and think about nominating any initiative, whether it's participation or education or anything that's really promoting diversity and inclusion. Make sure you get those nominations in. They opened today and nominations close on 30th of November. And also don't discount, obviously, look at all the other categories as well, because there's Community Official of the Year, Team of the Year, there's a whole range of different categories which are obviously open to everyone, so make sure you think broadly about which categories you might nominate for. And yeah, we're very proud to have the Inclusion Award now as part of the Victorian Sport Awards, which are obviously supported by state governments as well. So thanks, Sean, I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Tom. Tom, is there an award for photography or anything? Maybe we can create a photo award. Can't be what you can't see, so maybe we need more photography, more people. Everyone's got a camera. I would like to check if everyone on Facebook can hear us. We do have the wonderful Laura from AAA Play, who's always kind enough to help us with IT. So if you are watching via Facebook Live, please give us a like or a thumbs up so we know that you're listening and can hear us. So of course, before we really get into it, I would like to let us begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we are gathered today and pay our respects to their elders past, present, and future. Hopefully you enjoy the catering from Street. I like to plug them as a social enterprise who give us some delicious food. We spend a lot of money on catering. Might as well go to a good source. Phones, if you need to make phone calls, feel free to step outside. Bathrooms are around the corner. We're going to have 5 presentations in a row. Please save your questions for the end. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, just type in your comments or questions as we go. Laura will write them down, and we can ask them later, I think. And thank you in advance for everyone taking time out of the end of their day to be here, and thank you especially to our speakers. It's important that this is a bit of a disclaimer, especially whenever we're talking about disability or autism or people from New Zealand. Just because you've met one of them doesn't mean you have met them all, of course. Every Kiwi is different, maybe. They're all pretty laid back. But of course, everyone with autism, everyone with disability are unique and different. And so while you will hear case studies today about what some people are receiving under NDIS, it's important to not assume that everyone can assume that, can access that exact same thing. Always consider the individual when you're planning and relating their goals back to their individualized plans. I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Jack Swift has recently joined Sport and Rec Victoria. He's not only brought with him a great dress sense and sense of fashion, but he's also brought with him a lot of knowledge from the NDIS where he was previously. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Sean. I've only been copying your dress since I got to SRV. So for everyone that doesn't know me, my name's Jack Swift. I now work for Sport and Rec Victoria. For the past two and a half years, I've worked with the partner organisation responsible for delivering the NDIS in North East Melbourne, which is Brotherhood of St Lawrence. I originally worked as an area coordinator on day one of the rollout, and then moved into a business analyst role with the organisation. So my presentation today is to give you an overview of the NDIS operating environment. We going right?
Yep.
So the NDIS is a juggernaut in its own right. It is, once fully rolled out, will be a $22 billion a year scheme. Once rolled out in 2020 right across the country. It is a social reform, the biggest thing since Medicare, and with anything that needs to be rolled out to that magnitude, I suppose it's inevitable there's going to be some teething problems, but the investment from government is this social reform will be around for the next 100+ years. So there's a lot of things that are great that are happening with the NDIS, but there's a lot of things still to come and a lot of things we still need to work on. So the operating environment of the NDIS, we have the NDIA, which is essentially the government agency that overlooks and delivers the NDIS. They're in charge of delivering the NDIS and making decisions based on the legislation, which is the NDIS Act. A number of participants may be planned for by the agencies, but the majority of participants will be planned for by community partners, okay? So both your local area coordination and your early childhood, early intervention coordinators will do the majority of planning. And Melbourne is, or North East Melbourne has been one of the first regions to roll out. And as you can see, there's some of your community organisations that have won the tender to deliver the NDIS in their specific regions. The NDIS has two main points. The first one is NDIS planning for participants who transition into the scheme and meet access. The second one is ILC, which is information linkages and capacity building. And this image here really shows how the NDIS and ILC, LACs and ECEI coordinators really interact. So you have your mainstream system. So one of the fundamentals under the NDIS is that it doesn't replace what is already available through mainstream support. So it doesn't override the health system, it doesn't override the education system and what their responsibilities are. Your NDIS plans, as I said, can come from your NDIA, your partners in the community, LACs, ECEIs. Your ILC though has specific focuses on building the capacity of the community as a whole, okay? It also has a focus on assisting individuals who don't meet access under the NDIS to provide support to them to link up with mainstream and community services. And then the fourth pillar there, or your fifth pillar there, is your family, friends and informal supports, okay? So another key point of the NDIS is that it is not there to replace what is already established through informal and family supports. Your reasonable and necessary support. So I'm sure a number of you who are aware of the NDIS and who have had involvement with the NDIS have heard the terminology reasonable and necessary. And the reasonable and necessary terminology is based on Section 34 of the NDIS Act, and it pretty much justifies how supports will be included in an NDIS plan once an individual has been granted access under the scheme. So for supports to be considered RNN, the supports must support participants to pursue their goals, objectives and aspirations, increase their independence, increase social and economic participation, and develop their capacity to actively take part in the community. In order to be considered a reasonable and necessary support, it must be related to the individual's disability. Okay, so these points here are directly from the NDIS Act. So anyone that is to go through a planning meeting can identify how the NDIA make decisions, and that is one of the first key arguments under reasonable and necessary. It must be related to an individual's disability. And as we all know, we have disability and comorbidities as well. So if a support is to be funded under the NDIS, it really needs to relate to and link to why that individual has met access under the scheme, okay? If that's for a physical disability, but they also have comorbidities, the NDIS planners and delegates who approve the plans will only take into account what an NDIS participant has met access for. It should not include any day-to-day living costs that are not related to a participant's disability support needs. It needs to represent value for money, be likely to be effective and beneficial to the participant, and as I said before, take into account what is the responsibility of informal supports, family care and networks, and the community as a whole. So the NDIS is not to come in and override everything, it is to provide support in those areas specific to an individual's disability. Fourth part of the NDIS that I'm going to discuss today is plan management options. So anyone that has been through an NDIS planning meeting or has met access under the NDIS, once you receive your plan or before you receive your plan, you'll discuss plan management options. So there's three main options, which are self-management, plan management, and NDIA managed funding. So we'll just go back a step. So under self-management, essentially you're in control of your budget. You can access whatever provider you wish in line with your supports. Okay, so you have your three supports, which is your core, capacity and capital supports. So you can access whatever provider you need to. You'll log on to what's called the NDIS portal. If you're accessing a care worker or whatever it may be, and you're invoiced for their support, you will then log on to the NDIS portal. You'll put in the date the service was provided, the amount, a short description, and put in a payment request. That payment request will then be deposited in the next 28 to 48 hours into your bank account, as this slide shows here. And self-management for participants is not for everyone, but it allows greater choice and control, and really any participant or informal supports, if you are a plan nominee for a child or a plan representative, you can facilitate this process as well. So essentially, if a participant can pay their bills, self-management can be an option for them. The other management options are plan management, so it's to be managed by a financial intermediary, where you'll see supports within your NDIS plan allocated to a financial intermediary. And under plan management, you can again access both registered and non-registered providers. The only limitations there is, to the best of my knowledge, it hasn't changed as yet, is that you're only allowed to claim supports in line with the NDIS price guide. Okay, so that means whether a support from a certain provider, if they charge less through the plan management, or it was a few months ago anyway, they still have to pay the NDIS price guide. And then under NDIA managed funding, the funding is directly managed by the NDIA, which means you need to access registered providers, okay? So if you identify that all your providers are registered and you don't see any significant change of circumstances in the future, and you don't want any overheads or burden with managing your NDIS plan, that can be an option for you as well. So that's everything from my end. Hopefully it's given you an overview of how the NDIS operates in its current environment, and then we can hear from the others how they've gone through some of their planning process and planning meetings. So thank you.
Thank you, Jack. So that's a lot of information and quite detailed information, but we wanted to show everyone the breadth and the amount of choice and control, especially between self-managed, plan-managed, or you can have hybrid versions of that. The most important thing is that you can go to the NDIS website. There are fantastic videos. As well, you might hear that some sports and some community orgs, including some that we support, have been successful under ILC grants, which we expect there to be a Victorian round sometime next year. We would expect in the first half. So the best thing there is just to go to the website and sign up for the updates. The next speaker is Sophie Lynch, who I saw speak at the at the National Sports Convention in the Disability Stream. And I thought this is what we need. We need a little bit of a research foundation to understand what's working best and a little bit of evaluation as we go. And so it's really nice to see the fruit of a collaboration between Monash University and Disability Sport and Recreation. So collaborations can, of course, have these amazing outcomes. So welcome, Sophie, please.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I'm an occupational therapy student at Monash University, and I completed my honours project with Disability Sport and Recreation. In addition, I work as a support coordinator, and I have a brother who is a participant of the NDIS scheme. So with Disability Sport and Recreation, we found that there was a bit of a gap of knowledge, and that a lot of people were saying when we spoke to a lot of local area coordinators, sport isn't deemed reasonable and necessary, and that it's a luxury item if you wanted it funded in your plan. So we undertook a research project looking at, and the Australian Sports Commission found that 75% of people currently active with disabilities wanted to do more, and 85% of people currently inactive wanted to engage. And then they looked into all the barriers, and the biggest barrier was government support. So we looked at the rollout of the NDIS to see if we could break down these barriers. Of the committed supports, they found that there was a very small percentage going to social and civic, which is kind of where sport falls into, and as well as even less going to health and wellbeing. And of that being funded, a very small percentage was being utilised, simply because in some cases of participants we spoke to, they got the funding for someone to take them to basketball, someone transport, and they didn't get the wheelchair. So why would they use the funding? Because they actually didn't get everything that they needed to be able to do the sport. And then, as we all know, working in the scheme, you know that sport isn't a luxury item or leisure, that it actually has a range of benefits, from mental health to weight management, reduction of secondary diseases, and it's really important to be funded in plans. So with my uni partner, who's not here today, we created the DSR NDIS guide, which is to be launched on the DSR website. And it's a 6-step guide which helps people get ready for their planning meeting to make sure that everything they need for sport is included within their plan. So the first step is find a sport and recreation activity, because with the planners, they only have the time that they're in there with you. So if you go and going, I want to do tennis, they're not going to research it. They're not going to go, yeah, there's a tennis organisation. You need to be ready to go. These are the things I want to do. These are the organisations I want to connect with. So things such as going to AAA Play, becoming a member of DSR where they can help you find sports that you're interested in. And then doing your research into the things that you'll need as to do the sport. So equipment, transport, and accessibility and assistance needs were the things that we saw were the main areas that you needed funding. And with that, we included a template that you can bring to the planning meeting and show the LAC. So when we were making this guide, we were very lucky to speak to a former LAC who, when we first spoke to her, was employed and said, I can't tell you anything. And then 2 months down the track, had left due to being told some things from the NDIS that didn't align with her. She was a parent of someone with a disability and she didn't agree with everything. So she gave us a call back and said, these are the things you need to put in your plan, these are the things people need to go forward with. So we were very lucky to have that contact. And then going around, we had that information confirmed by OT Australia, a range of different government organisations and sporting groups. So a lot of the time, you need to go in with a template. So we like a day-by-day template of how sport and recreation fits into your life. It can work in two ways. You can go, one, these are the things I do and I want them to still be funded. Or alternatively, you can go, I don't do anything 3 days of the week because I have no funding, so I need to get it funded. And we just included a template on there so people can just print that out as well. It's just a bunch of information you take to your planning meeting. And then about setting goals. So while sport and recreation isn't like a line item or a category, it fits into choice and control, relationships, health and wellbeing, and social and community participation. So an example of it, a goal would be your activity is you want to play basketball, but your goal is you want to make new friends, have social participation, and take part in the community. And the broader you have the goal, if you go back and want something else, you want to do a new sport, then most likely that will be funded if you have a broad goal of taking part of the community rather than I want to play basketball, because if you decide you like tennis, you can't get that funded. So we included a template with that. So the template is your goal, you put in the sports and recreation activities you want to include, and then what supports align with each one, just kind of putting it all together to make sure that you're not missing out on that wheelchair if you are going to basketball. And then putting all the information together. So everyone has a checklist on their table, and that's a checklist we found was most likely to be all the things that you need, because when you apply for access, all the information that you apply for access for, the LAC or the planner doesn't actually get that information. So they're going in with no information about you, it's what you can provide. So providing information of your disability, for example, the question we got asked at my brother's planning meeting who has Down syndrome was this a result of like an accident? And we were like, yes, maybe, like chromosomal, it's like very confusing, but we had to say no, Down syndrome is, it's he's since birth, and it's not going to change, he's not going to lose that chromosome, which we had to do every year was go back to the doctors and say, yep, still got Down syndrome, tick the box, and he could keep getting funded. So part of other things is the sports you want to take involved in, any aids or equipment. Going in, if you do need equipment, the best thing to do is do the research, get the quotes, maybe bring in 3. Bring in a low cost one, the one you really want, and then a ridiculously high one. So then when they look at it, they go, oh, that one's reasonable, which is the one you wanted the whole way along, which is the one in the middle. And then with transport, advocating for that, as well as information on your support needs, your daily activities, and your list of your sport and recreation goals together. And then at the end, just if you're not happy with your plan, you can always go to get it reviewed. We asking for help, so having an advocacy provider go with you. So like an external body that if it's just you and them in the meeting, it's worded like their word against your words, having someone else there that's external. And then remembering that sport is more than just fun. So we brought this list of why sport is so important for you to bring and show the planner. Actually, sport is important not just because it's a leisure activity, because there are physical benefits, there's psychological benefits, and it's helpful all. So I use this actually through my brother's planning meeting. At the moment, he participates in, he goes to the gym, disability bowling league, he does dancing, he does basketball, and I just included some photos of him doing his dance moves and playing basketball with his disability team. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sophie. Sophie listed some of the benefits, the outcomes of sport and involvement, participation in active recreation. Of course, we think a lot about sport and footy in Victoria, but we don't want to forget about the benefits of just bushwalking, going on a trail hike, and the benefits that has. Even if there wasn't amazing outcomes that we know are associated with sport, access to culturally significant activities is a human right, and we also have the Victorian Equal Opportunity Act that asks that we make reasonable modifications so that people can access sport and recreation. So I do think that we could wage the argument that sport is not just a luxury, it's most likely part of a human right. Thank you, Sophie. We've laid the base. Jack introduced the NDIA, the actual act in which it is governed under. Sophie has introduced very eloquently a little bit of research as well as a family perspective. And next we have Andrew Weiss, who's not only a father whose daughter has autism, but he's also been involved in the sport and rec sector for a very long time. Recently, as the entrepreneur, the founder of My Sport Live, and before that, he was the CEO of Motorcycling Victoria. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, and hopefully you'll hear that giving a bit of a personal perspective as a parent, which is what I'm up here to do today, will naturally flow on from what we've already heard. So to the few people in the room who I do know and have probably heard bits and pieces of this already, apologies, but bear with me. So just a quick one on my work background so that you get an understanding of the tie-in from my sport background and tied into what we're talking about today with Evie and her NDIS plan. So I did a PR degree at RMIT, undergrad, and followed that up with a Master of Business in Sport Management at Deakin. Spent 12 months as a journalist covering Melbourne Victory, Victoria Bush Rangers games, a whole host of sporting events, and as an editor at the Sporter website and their subsidiary sites as well. Then 4 years at Motorcycling Australia, the national governing body for motorcycle sport in Australia. So as a comms officer, then communications manager, and moved up to operations manager there. Before then moving across to Motorcycling Victoria for 4 years as the CEO there. Before starting the current business that I work in, co-founding My Sport Live with a partner, looking at helping smaller sporting organisations be able to afford a number of different ways to better promote themselves and their activities and what they're doing. And recently, last couple of years, just lecturing a subject at La Trobe in managing innovation in sport. So that's where I've come from in the last 15 years from a sport perspective. Personally, and we'll get to, you'll see the relevance of why I've included this as we go through. Married, I've got a son, Ethan, who's 9 years old and is absolutely obsessed with sport. He thinks his dad's got the best job in the world, which is pretty cool. Daughter Evie, who's 6 years old, and she was diagnosed as having autism and being on the spectrum when she was 3. So I think it's really important we're going to basically talk about Evie and my experience getting her plan put together and how that can tie in with opportunities for Ethan. So Ethan's at the local primary school and he has something on every day of the week. He's done Net Set Go, he's done Milo cricket, he's done Auskick and played 2 years of footy. He's in the National Boys Choir, he plays piano, he learns a language. Like every day of the week there is something that he is doing. For Evie, up until recently, all of her co-curricular activities were based on, and you'll see soon the range of supports that we have in place, but appointments. Yeah, so until 18 months ago, where she loves music, she loves dancing, been through half a dozen different dance schools before finding the right place for her, which is absolutely incredible. Outside of that, previously she hasn't really had much from a co-curricular point of view to focus on. And there are a number of reasons for that, and we'll look at that shortly. So recently, and by recently I mean 3.5 weeks ago, we had our NDIS plan approved, which is pretty exciting. And in that plan, we've got funding approved for swimming, gymnastics, and the dance program that she's already part of. We received all of the funding that we applied for, which is obviously a very good result. We're happy with that. interestingly, the way it's set out, obviously we get all of our funding for everything, whereas previously we were pulling different bits of funding from all over the place and being part of programs that were heavily subsidised and you didn't have to pay for, but now under the plan you are basically paying the full rate for every activity that you do because it's funded at the full rate that it's supposed to, if that makes sense. To put the plan together, we were really heavily reliant on recommendations from our support team. So our support team have literally been 3.5 years of putting them together, having the right OT for Evie, the right speechy, having her, she's at a special school, she was part of an early education program. Just recently she's actually split school now with the local primary 2 days a week, but still at the special school 3 days a week. Her physio, her integration aide at the local primary school, paediatrician, the workers from the holiday care program that we put her through Moira, the ENT specialist when it came to stuff like the swimming and what she can and can't do. So we were really reliant on, when formulating the plan, what she needed to help reach her goals based on all of the specialists that we had around us. And in the end, and we just heard about the fact that education's a really big part of it, we were only limited in terms of what we could put in the plan by what we actually knew about. So this is a pretty big key. So our NDIS appointed planner did an okay job. We certainly had our issues and we certainly believe in the concept of the NDIS and the plan itself and very open to how it rolls out. But just to give you an example, the first meeting was unbelievable. When she left after the 2.5 hours meeting with myself and Anna, my wife, we were really, really excited. It took about 6 or 7 months to actually get to the process of getting the plan finalised. And even throughout that process, we have money approved in our plan for continence, and Evie's now fully toilet trained. So there are still certain things that didn't line up. That happens, obviously with the process it's new. But I think that actually highlights the importance, again, of going back to our support staff and our crew around us to help formulate exactly what it was that we're trying to achieve through our NDIS plan. Which clearly is in the next couple of points there. We really relied on the information through them for setting the goals for the plan. Anna and I, we each attended 5-day seminars in putting a plan together a long time before we even got through that process. We'd done all of our reading, we'd done all of our research, like hours and hours and hours and hours, and in the end most of that pretty much went out the window after that first meeting. And then the relationship we've got with our OT, where she pointed out exactly what it is, exactly what type of language you need to use, and that was all driven again by our OT, then in conjunction with our other support workers. But throughout that process, in terms of understanding what areas we could tap into for the funding, especially from a sport and rec point of view, that was never really highlighted the whole way through. So areas that the NDIS plan focused on in terms of our goals, the goals were set based on feeding into these areas: mobility, communication, social interaction, learning, self-care and self-management. So all of the goals were based around improvements for Evie in these areas. So you can clearly see, especially the first three, that there is a specific relevance with sport and recreation and physical activity, and being part of a club and interacting with other kids and all of that sort of stuff that clearly tick off a few of those earlier on. So again, linking that into the money that you're trying to get, that there is that natural connection there where you should be able to get a significant amount of funding as long as you're aware of what activities there are for them to participate in. Okay, so linking those goals back to the sport, and as I said, it's clearly an area that could be capitalised on if you know about it from an education point of view. So all of that money is there for us to be able to use, yeah, and for sports. And sorry for those of you in the room who aren't specifically within sports, but obviously because of my background, I've put this together based on national sporting organisations, state sporting organisations. They're putting together programs that are trying to bring in more members, facilitate more participation, drive more revenue, give clubs the ability to cater for everyone from the community, those whole sides of things. And this money is there through the NDIS and through individuals who have already been given it or are applying for it to be able to help tick off all of those things in a sports strategic plan. The biggest opportunity is around educating people about your programs. This is what I've seen. So when it came to the swimming, the gymnastics, the dancing, they are just things that we actually went away and researched ourselves and went, well, we know she needs work on her core strength, and we know that she's got certain issues with fine motor skills. We know that she can't swim when she goes in the pool and she's done swimming lessons. It's actually water play, not part of swimming lessons to learn how to swim if she falls in the pool. They're things that we did ourselves and put into the plan that then that our OT said, yeah, that's a great idea. It links in with this goal that we've got, this goal that we've got, this goal that we've got. And our, we'd already had all of the goals set out with what we're doing before the plan anyway, with how we're working with our specialists. So it just fits into that category. If she had come to us and said, we know there's this really good hockey program, or we know that there's this really good basketball program, or here is the dance place to go to, or here is the whatever it is, we would have gone, amazing, that sounds wonderful, then gone and done the research, then put it into our plan. Does that make sense? Similarly, I mentioned about Ethan's school versus Evie's school. Other than Auskick at Evie's school, I haven't seen anything throughout her school in terms of participating in out-of-school sporting activities. Yeah, she's at a special school in Aspendale. And I've spoken to the CEO of Tempe Bowling Australia about this. Like there are programs that if we knew that existed as a result of it being done through the school, we probably would have, the same way with Ethan, this is on after school on a Tuesday, amazing. Do you want to do it? Yes, great, done. So the education process, how do I as a parent, how do I as someone who's applying for funding under the plan actually find out that these programs exist? Yeah, and just because I've got the money as well, by the way, it's not too late to capture our pool of funding, because the funding's set into pots effectively, which allows me to access this amount for support workers, this amount for our goals in each of the different areas. So if I find out about Bowl Patrol and really want Evie to be part of that, I can actually go, well, I've got $15,000 in this pool to spend in the year, and actually I've changed my mind, I'm going to use it for this, and that will still be okay because it's working towards the goals that were set out earlier. Yeah, I think just the final thing with that, we heard about the different types of ways you can manage your plan. We are self-managing our plan, which gives us that ultimate control. So again, it's worth noting, one whole side of things is how are people educated in terms of what they can tap into before they're applying for funding. The other is, because we're self-managing, we have the control. So it's an ongoing thing. How do I still find out about all of the opportunities that exist out there for Evie to be able to change what I'm going to do within the plan because I can. Yeah. So I've tried to condense it as much as I can, and I've probably gone a little bit over, but absolutely available if anyone wants to discuss that or anything else in more detail.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
I think it's really nice to have that mix of professional experience, someone that has trained to be in the sports world for so long. And then I think if you have a child who's diagnosed with a condition that you weren't expecting, you're sort of thrown into it. And so it's interesting to see how all that training in sport and knowledge, you're sort of back to figuring it all out. But thank you for sharing not just your professional insights, but ultimately your personal. You've heard that for Evie, there's a GP, a pediatrician, a speechy, an OT, ENT. So it's certainly, they say it takes a village to raise a child, and I think that is the ultimate example. But of course, you guys are part of that village, sport and recreation. You might see a pediatrician 2 or 3 or 4 times a year, but if you're going to Riding for the Disabled, you might see that person once a week, or if you're going to Bowl Patrol, you're going to see that person every week, and so you are a huge part of that village. We're going to continue on with the father's perspective, not just father, but also a lot of professional experience within early childhood intervention services and the NDIS. So I'd like to hand over to Brian Kirk.
Hello. I feel somewhat unprepared. I don't know what the audience is made out of. How many parents with a child with a disability are in the room? Couple? Two. What about people that are in the sport and recreation area in the disability space? Fantastic. Totally unprepared, I've got something else organised, but that's okay. My presentation is in some ways going to be consolidation of what's already come across, which is great because information is the key, and getting the right information is the difference between success and failure. So, I should take that myself. I work for the Early Child Intervention as a business advisor for organisations to allow them to be business ready. I'm also part of Mentone Life Saving Club, looking after the community program where we've introduced disability organisations using our facilities. And we also started the Starfish Nipper program within the club. That's all about me, but I want to talk about something really important. This is a case study about my daughter, Miranda. She's aged 12, she's very cute, and she's always been cute. She has mitochondrial disease complex 1. It's a chromosomal disease, so that means that it has consequences. The disease, which means that her mitochondria, which produce the energy in the body for energy, muscle development, cognitive development, don't work. So she has developmental delays, hearing. She wears hearing aids, glasses. She has low muscle tone and fatigue, so she needs a wheelchair or walking frame. She's also peg fed, so her muscles in her throat don't work. Funny as anything. Starting to eat, next thing you know, she'll fall asleep because her muscles are just so fatigued. So she's peg fed, so that's something that happens quite a few times a day, plus she has consonance issues. So when we started looking at the NDIS position, she's quite complex. Cute, but complex. But within her plan, we managed to specifically get funds to support her in the Starfish Nipper program. So it's written in the program that she'll be supported in Starfish. We also managed, and to take your point, to get swimming included as a support worker. So it wasn't directly swimming, but it was part of the therapy. So, yes, it is all about the goals. The NDIS is not like health, where it's not a single line of activity, it's quite integrated. So everything that Miranda has with her starfish and swimming is all about her goals. So it's worth, I'm a firm believer in not reading everything out of a slide, but I will on this one. Miranda's goals were to be part of, her first goal was she wanted to increase her independence around the home and community. And I will do this by improving my communication and motor skills. So there's a physio element there, and there was communication and OT. Her second goal is I wish to increase my strength and mobility so I can access the community safely and participate in more activities of my choice. Similar to yourself, there is nothing available for Miranda, and we're in a similar area in Parkdale. There's nothing available for Miranda other than the Starfish program that I know of. Since her plan's been written in May, I have found out some other things as well, but the research, there's just nothing yet. They are getting better at it. Her longer plans is to involved in, it's about relationships, communication. So it's, her whole plan was, and what she's getting in that plan was related to the goals and fulfill those goals. So Starfish Snippers, we introduced Starfish Snippers into the Mentone Lifesaving Club a couple of years ago. It was developed by Anglesea Lifesaving Club because there was a need, this is before the NDIS, for both intervention and one-on-one support for kids with special needs. So Miranda's been doing that for the time. So part of, when it was introduced in a plan, it wasn't because we wanted to take a step back, but what we found was that the Lifesaving Club is such a big part of our family life in our community. Our son was being disadvantaged because we were spending so much time with our daughter that my son was feeling left out, and there were some issues there. So when we were talking about the plan and putting it together, it was about the whole family, the implications of, and in the planning process, they talk about formal and informal supports. So the plan outcome is just as much about my son as it is about my daughter. And Starfish Snippers is a good example of how it integrated both. We still pay for club membership. We still pay for the Rashi. Anybody involved in sport, as you all know, you're forever paying for something. There's another type of, my son alone is a fashion icon. My daughter is too. So what the NDIS is doing is paying for the supports. As far as swimming goes, in preparation for this, I did a bit of research, and occasionally the NDIS will fund swimming lessons in their entirety. However, they believe, and this is about fair and reasonable, part of their controls, is they believe everybody should be swimming, and therefore a family would do that anyway, and therefore they won't always fund it. What they may do is fund the difference, they may fund equipment, but it's only in circumstance when you can relate it to your whole plan that they will fund that activity in its entirety. That's part of the fair, and I call it fair and reasonable. However, for families where they may be vulnerable or in socioeconomic situations, where paying for swimming lessons, that entirety, isn't possible, well, therefore, in some cases, in a lot of cases, especially out west way, the NDIS will fund the whole program. So no plan is the same, just like no disease or no circumstance is the same. So it's one thing the NDIS is really good at is making sure they don't generalise too much. They make these big mother statements, and that's because it's really hard to say what works for us and what we've received is the same for everybody else. So this is pretty much what Miranda's plan looks like. So under her plan, under social, and this is where I was saying it's almost a consolidation, her Starfish Nipper program is about social and community participation, while the swimming is social and community participation under core, but the capital is about improved daily living skills. Because for the swimming for Miranda, it's about strength, mobility and independence. She's picked up from school, she must dress herself, must change herself and go through that whole process. The swimming is just a consequence of it. There is I put down that capacity building, increased social community participation. I wish they'd make some acronyms, make them smaller. And that's because a lot of other activities that I know, a lot of other plans, that's where it falls under as well. And I'll deal with this a bit later on. Okay, I thought with my professional hat on and consolidation as a dad, and I must say, whilst I've been working in the NDIS space for 4 years, it does not prepare you to be a dad with a child with a disability, because it changes all the time and it's quite unique. So these are the lessons I've found. You don't need to know everything. You just have to find your little corner. we can really get bogged down in understanding the entirety. Just focus on your area. It'll save you a lot of restless sleep. I'm not going to talk about that one, but what I did find is that recreation supports, this is part of the NDIS website under the planning. So they recognise that recreation, including sport, is an activity, pastime or hobby that is carried out. It's not competitive sport. I would say that if you are a person with a disability wanting to be in a competitive sport, that will probably be a combination of a number of funding streams, including the NDIS, but we'll see, but it's different. But they recognise that it is social inclusion participation, benefits health and well-being, and improves skills and capabilities and self-esteem. So all the things that we talked about as an integrated, why sport is important, the NDIS does recognise it. And if I had have known this quote when I went into the planning process, it would have been a lot quicker and I could have provided that document. I put this in because talking to families all the time, the biggest or the fundamental shift is the NDIS is not healthcare. Healthcare is saying, I've broken an arm or I'm under rehabilitation, I will fix you, and these are the steps I'm going to do. The NDIS isn't like that. It's holistic. It's about a whole of life, and it's about removing barriers in society or in your community or within your own socioeconomic bubble that allows you to have a better life. It's a bit more holistic than that. It's not end-to-end, it's a lot more integrated, and that's why a person's plan is not the same. And I'll tell you a story, because I work in the early childhood space. Two twins, obviously born on the same date, same condition, however their plans were completely different because the parent thought that for Sally, she wanted to achieve this. Therefore, to do that, her plan looked different. While Sam was a little bit more introverted and he wasn't interested in doing those social things. So his plan was different and smaller, but it met their needs. So it's really interesting where you fix a broken arm the same way, but if you've got a child with a disability, your outcomes or your needs, your goals will be different. So it's not vanilla ice cream. I made this because where health is great, it's a nice flat line, you really do need to understand how it works. And part of understanding how it works is to understand that it's complicated, but it's an insurance model. Insurance says, prove to me that this is an outcome that will demonstrate what you want. And then at the end of it, show me that you've achieved it. Now I'll tell you an example. A lot of individuals or participants are finding that their second year plan is less. It's substantially less. And that's because they can't demonstrate that they've achieved their goals. There's a whole thing about using a registered provider or non-registered provider. At the end of the day, the participant has to demonstrate that they've achieved their goals. Or, if the goals have been modified, you need that evidence to support it. So, in the sport and rec place, it is a great opportunity for your club and for strategic plans and all that, but whatever you do, make sure you put in place that if you have people there with a disability and you're offering a service, that you have something in place that you can demonstrate that you've achieved something. It's not just about the bucks. If I get it, that's really good. And the reasonable and necessary element is a reasonable and necessary for one person is not the same for someone else. And we've got some questions there. This is how it's allocated. So it's about the goals. I won't go through it. It's value for money, social community participation. I'm not going to read these out. These are how it fits in with the support items. Within the NDIS, there's capital, core, and I just had a memory and capacity. So within the core and capacity, there are support items. You need to understand how they fit when you're making a plan. I'm not going to go through it. One of the greatest lessons, or the hardest lesson, is for those with a child or an adult with a disability, you're told strength-based. How's your life? It's great. Miranda's fantastic. It's good. But under the insurance model, and you want to get part of the planning, it's insurance, it's deficit. So rather than saying in the planning process, Oh, what do you do? How's your day? How's your day? Oh, it's good. I get her up and take her to school. That's strength-based. Deficit is I get her up, I change a nappy, put her on the peg, I lay out her clothes. She can't do it herself, so we do it. That's deficit. It is not in any way demeaning the child, but it's what it's doing is talking about reality, talking about how now, knowing that, can we improve it. The planning process. Pre-plan. What you guys said about getting the information, doing the research is so important. Find out what sports are on. And if you are a sporting organisation, put something on your website saying, we provide, and here's some notes, provide that, because kids with special needs have very limited opportunity out there. And we won't talk about the history of block funding, but if you put something on your website, that's something that they can move towards. But understand the language and put it in such a way. I always recommend that you talk to a provider. If you have a back of people, that's great. Not everybody has that, especially if you're early diagnosed. But go to a provider. They will help you with pre-planning. For them, it's marketing. It's acquisition of new clients. They will go with you and help you with that language, because the plan is what you're going to have for the next year. So you really need to get that in place. And you're not being deceitful. It's actually you're talking about the quality of life for your child. Reasonable and necessary. I stole this. I was actually a friend of mine was in LAC, similar to Sophie. He gave me all the training material that the LACs have, and this is the list of questions that they actually look at when they're deeming whether something is fair and reasonable. So I'm not going to read them all, but will the support enable the participant meet their goals and objectives? So that is just a constant theme that we said. Will the support represent value for money in both terms of benefit achieved and the cost of an alternative support? An example would be, there's a base price of about 16 grand, it might have changed, for a wheelchair. But if you need that wheelchair with steroids, you have to make a case for it. But if you can say, look, if I buy this wheelchair now, that will meet my goals, and that means that it'll be better for the next 5 years. So in actual fact, spend the money now, I won't have to do it later on. You can demonstrate value for money that way. Does the support relate to the participant's disability? They won't give you an iPad if you're they won't give you a pair of runners if you have no legs. That's a really bad example, but that's just the one I came up with. And is it duplicating? So all these questions, it's not the same for everybody. Once you get the plan, this is just a lesson. I found that the planning experience was 6 weeks. We spent so much time, there must have been so much information, and all they gave me at the end was 5 pages. So as soon as I spoke to a provider, I had to tell my story over again. So my lesson is, ask for some of that background information, ask for some of that support. So if you've gone to the trouble of saying, hey, I want starfish nippers in my plan, make sure you've got the documentation for doing it. So this is where I've got it. So under that core support, how would a provider know that you want starfish in the plan? Social, community, civic participation, support to explore the participate in community-based activities of interest and to develop, build and maintain friendships. Cool. The support information says support working to assist Miranda on a Sunday to continue her starfish nippers. So ask for that information. You've spent 6 weeks, many hours, agonised over it, make sure you get a copy of it so you can actually use that as reference. I won't talk about the others, they're just examples going through. There's some really great resources for kids up to 8. The NDIS planning workbook is fantastic. It's about gathering that information. There's an adult version as well, and I'll leave the links with you guys. There's also the NDIS, bless their cotton socks, and I'm a fan of the NDIS. They've brought out 3 books, Understanding the NDIS, Planning and Using Your NDIS Plan. If you are a service organisation or a sport, you may want to have those on your website just as information. That's a quote I'll leave. The NDIS is intended to make an ordinary life possible for people who have an impairment that would otherwise exclude them from an ordinary life. The NDIS is tended to remove barriers by providing the equipment and support required for a person to be able to live an ordinary life. Take that to your planning meeting, and I think they have to give you what you want.
Thank you, Brian. I've always enjoyed the slogans on the Victorian license plates, and I think my favorite is Victoria, the place to be. And I think with parents pushing things along like Brian, I think it's fantastic. We are in a very good place. There's a lot of knowledge and a lot of passion, and we are a sporting state and the home of sport. And so that way that sport and recreation helps people to lead an ordinary life, we do play a very important role in that. I'm really thankful that we've had the opportunity to hear from 3 personal perspectives. Sophie's brother has Down syndrome, Andrew's daughter has autism, and Brian's daughter has mitochondrial disease. And so quite a diverse range of disabilities represented. If you know me, you know that I'm pushing an aquatics agenda, and I always have to apologize to tennis and gymnastics for that, but we know the value of aquatics, we know the value of swimming and therapy, and that it is potentially life-saving, and so it's nice to leverage, sport is so much more than just kicking an odd-shaped ball through sticks. And so I had the privilege of seeing Veronica present a few weeks ago at the Life Saving Victoria conference, all about the Starfish Nippers program, which is pretty incredible. So we're going to continue with that aquatics approach, and welcome Veronica.
Thanks very much, Sean, and thanks to everyone for the insight, especially the parents. Yep, I've been around.
To the right,
Yep. I've been around for 33 plus years in the disability sector. So I started when I was 18, 19, working in institutions. So I can say to you that I have seen massive changes, and even working with clients that lived in residential facilities, that, getting them out and about to access the community. And some of the boundaries that we came across, taking someone to a swimming program, people go, oh, you can't come here. As a young person, 18, 19, saying, excuse me, I had a battle on my hands, but I took it on. So those people that could have as much fun as you and I in the community. So yes, I've been doing it for 33 years, but also I'm a mum of 2 boys, 27 and 25, that had a great journey through life-saving in this state and do it nationally as well.
Excuse me, Veronica, could you put the microphone up a little bit?
Is that better?
Thank you.
Apologies. Yep.
Sorry.
So I was, with my children being involved with the Williamstown Life Saving Club, it was easy for me to put my hand up to be the Disability Starfish Coordinator. So we're in our 3rd season this year. I went to Surf Life Saving Australia conference earlier this year in June, where it brought all the clubs around Australia together. They did some presentations about the current clubs that are actually doing Starfish Nippers and what that looks like for them. So Surf Life Saving Australia has made it a name for them to be disability inclusive. You'll see the aims there on the slide. I won't go through them, but it was very supportive for the clubs that have not thought about having a disability inclusive program for any participants or members of their community. So from that, well, it's gone too fast. Life Saving Victoria have taken on the aims from Surf Life Saving Australia. So it's same again. We had a conference with Surf Life Saving Victoria to bring all the clubs from Victoria together to demonstrate some of the current clubs that are actually doing Starfish Nippers. And as Brian was saying, Mentone's one of those clubs and originated from Anglesey. Williamstown, we only have 7 young participants, but we've just got our sign up happening at the moment. So if you know any families that are in the West and want to come down to the Life Saving Club, just contact our Life Saving Club and we will be more than happy to be involved. So with my experience in the disability sector and having been in leadership roles for not-for-profit community service organisations, my role is to make sure that my staff could implement plans. So before NDIS, they used to call them individual service programs.
ISP.
ISPs, what is it?
Support
Support plans. So we actually had to develop plans for each of the individuals. It was part of the legislation and part of the disability standards. So in my craziness, I said, I'm going to do this for our nippers to get ready for NDIS. So we've implemented this. So each of our nippers that are part of our Starfish program come along. So from their first session, I do lots of visuals. So we do a bit of video, we do use cue cards, and then with our volunteers, one-on-one, they sit with the participants and we show them the activities about life-saving, what they're going to do at the beach, whether it's water skills, whether it's land skill, all the beach activities, flags, etc. We talk about why we have lifesavers on the beach, you know, which part do they want to learn. So we identify goals in that. So our volunteers sit with them, just scribble over one of these, then that comes back to me. I have a discussion with the family, and if Johnny wants to do this, and we develop some plans. So when they're going to NDIS, they've actually got a plan. I've actually shared this with the other Starfish Nipper programs, so if they wanted some implementation around that, or want me also to come to their clubs to talk to them about how they might facilitate this process, because some people would not have some knowledge or experience in developing the plan to provide that. And same again, when this season with some of our nippers coming back, at least we'll have some outcomes. Or we might not have some outcomes. They might identify that Johnny actually wants to do the same goal again. And you'll see with some of the goals as well, it might be about Johnny, you know, getting his bag ready on a Saturday that would be similar to when Johnny wants to go to school. So at least it's repetition, and you know, he's developing those skills about what's going to happen for Johnny, whether it's Monday to Friday going to school or Saturday or Sunday going to nippers. Next, our program is a side-by-side program. So we start half an hour later, just so the young people that are coming new to the program, they're not overwhelmed, because Williamstown have over 400 nippers that can be sitting on the beach in the morning, so it can be quite crazy. So we start that half an hour and we do it side by side. The reason I want it to be side by side is so if Johnny actually wants to jump into his age group and have that experience and he's feeling really confident, off he goes with the volunteer and they can jump into to do the normal age group program. If they're feeling uncomfortable and they want to come back just to the Starfish Nippers, that's okay as well. With the Starfish Nippers that started at Anglesey, we've got a toolkit for all life-saving clubs that can actually use, which is really, really fortunate for us. So as soon as the kids come in the morning, we all together, we get in a little circle and we go like starfish, and you know, it's real exciting. Kids love it, and so do the families as well, with the interaction and the participation in their community. Yes. Just letting you know some of the resources that we use, visual cue cards, lots of tools and stuff. I mean, with the flags, they're like rubber hoses that we use when kids are doing flags on the beach. We've just bought some additional pool toys that kind of make it a little bit fun. Sometimes some of our kids don't want to participate because they're a bit concerned about those tools or resources. So I kind of, you know, have discussion with some of the families about, you know, what Johnny might like, or what might work, or they might have a favourite toy or something that they can bring along to the beach and get dragged along in the sand, etc. So, also what I'm doing this year, in the next couple of weeks, is doing disability awareness training. So for all of our volunteers that are patrolling the beach, we're going to focus on providing them with knowledge and information so they're feeling confident when they're supporting, whether it's part of our starfish or whether it's part of them patrolling. So what we're going to do, our main focus is giving them some information on different types of disabilities and also communication. And then also being able to be adaptable and being flexible in the activities that we would actually do in life-saving. So we're being a little bit creative because I have the skills and expertise and have some great friends that I've worked with in this sector that are going to come along as well. We've also invited several of our other life-saving clubs as well as Mentone if some of their volunteers want to come along as well. So same again, it's about sharing that knowledge, that information, so we can all be inclusive for the members of the community to participate in sport wherever they reside or wherever they live or whatever their choices are. And I just got an example there. We've got a little girl, Tara, who you will see in the video after. I remember her first day. There was no way. Williamstown sand's not smooth and plush. It's very coarse and yucky. She didn't want to walk on the sand. There was no way she was going to walk on the sand. But now she doesn't even recognise. She'll be back next season, and she's walking on the sand, not even realising what it's about anymore. Which is, small steps. But she's achieved a goal by actively participating in all of the season.
We'll go to the video.
Yeah, so the video is just the visual from when we did the planning from the very beginning and then to the end where they did a bit of celebration. Thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. So while we watch the video, please think about questions. So thank you, Veronica. That was fantastic. Thank you, Veronica. That was a nice so my head is swirling. I think I learned a lot. I've been in this sector for disability in general for 15 years. And of course the NDIS is something parent perspectives, professional perspectives, as well as a few resources. The resource that is on the table, we can email you copies of that, and Aidan is currently working on a website, Aidan from Disability Sport and Rec, and then of course you saw a very nice table that Veronica showed as well, where it has the goals and the outcomes that both Brian and Jack and Andrew had spoke to before. We would like to encourage some questions from Facebook to see if anyone is watching or listening, so please feel free to type in questions. If anyone has to go, I realize it's pushing 5 o'clock now, but if you'd also like to eat more food, there's plenty of catering. So, first question, who wants to be the first? Laura, is there an online question?
Yeah, this is a question for Andrew from Rachel. Regarding EV Sports being funded, is that NDIS funding for the activity or just the additional supports needed?
Yeah, it's a good question, and we heard a bit about
Will the
that.
microphone work? So
We'll take it. We heard a bit about that in terms of within the plans and what is actually funded for. So basically, what you don't get funded for is if you're, and I'll address everyone because obviously everyone's listening. If Ethan would do it and I would pay for Ethan to do it, then it's not going to get funded purely because you want them to do the activity. But for Evie to do swimming, or Evie to do gymnastics, or Evie to do nippers, or Evie to do any of these sports that we're talking about, she needs one-on-one support. She is a flight risk. She has a concentration span of 30 seconds, if that. She actually needs someone there to be with her the whole time. So I can't enroll her in a local tennis program that has a class with one person teaching and 6 kids, or swimming lessons that has a swimming instructor and 6 or 7 children, however many the ratios are. She needs that one-to-one support. So the funding effectively allows her to participate in the activity with the support she needs to do it. But again, when it comes to actually paying for swimming lessons, it is not reasonable to suggest that that it should be funded when, again, for Ethan as the example, we would pay for him to do swimming lessons. Does that help with that?
I think so. I think that answers the question. And I think that that's probably, Jack maybe would agree that there are the parts that everyone has to pay for, which are not going to be funded.
Yeah, that's right. I think the way to look at it is for any individual in the community and for all of us growing up, our parents probably or most likely paid for swimming lessons. So the NDIS is not to come over the top and pay for an individual's swimming lessons unless they need that further support to participate in that activity or whatever activity of choice they want to participate in. And as Andrew said, I'm sure it is not locked in just to that activity. So if Evie, wanted to participate in another activity down the track, whether it be, I'll just say cricket, for instance, and she required that one-to-one support to participate in that program, Andrew would be able to utilise the support from the NDIS budget there.
Like Nippers, having now seen that video.
Yeah. Hopefully there's a few more children joining the Nippers program. Any other questions? Lex, please.
Yeah, thanks very much for all that presentation. It's fantastic. I've got a question regarding adults in the network. How would transport be funded, or how would one get transport funded? And is it funded with or without the activity being funded?
So I'll just repeat the question so everyone can hear it, including Facebook. When it comes, especially for adults, how is transportation funded to access sport and recreation?
Yeah, is transportation to be funded?
Again, it'd need to come back to the fact that you can show through your disability and the functional impact of your disability you are unable to, one, drive, or two, be able to utilise public transport to attend a specific program of choice, okay, whether that is sport, recreation, whatever that is, you need to prove really the functional impact of your disability and why you can't access those mainstream services such as public transport or drive a personal vehicle.
It'd have to be linked
There's a
into.
microphone.
So the example would be linked into your goal.
Okay.
So if the goal was to participate in a particular activity, but you could not meet those requirements, that would be part of, okay, tick the box, I need transport for that. If the activity is to learn to be totally independent, there may be an element of transport until you've learned to be independent. So it's not hard. Transport and travel are tricky.
Thank you both. A question in the far side, please, from Disability Sport Victoria.
I'm Rosa. My daughter Jacinta, who's 41, didn't have the wonderful opportunities that are available now, but she has participated in Riding for the Disabled, in the All Abilities Basketball, Sailability, a number of opportunities that I sourced. Firstly, this presentation today is just fantastic, and it should be provided as widely as possible. I didn't have the opportunities, although I was a bit of a goer and tried where others didn't. The NDIS, Jacinta has a plan, only last 12 months, is a real change for families and for people with disabilities. It is providing opportunities that we never had 30, 40 years ago. And if you can navigate through it, and a message to state sporting associations that you, in fact, like everything that was presented, you have to take all of those new ideas or strategies to ensure that your sport can benefit from being a provider for people with disabilities without being too onerous on the organisation. In the past, it's been very difficult for state sporting associations. We always talked about inclusion. The word's been around a long time, but it was very difficult for state sporting associations to implement a lot of what's in their policy. Might have been there because SRB said you had to have a policy, but not necessarily being able to implement it. So a message to state sporting associations is to, take heed. Also, I hope these presentations will be emailed to us.
Yes, but maybe with a 2-week delay. I'm very slow.
If there's anything personal about Evie's plan or the others, then you just remove those.
Yeah.
We don't really need to have those details, but certainly to also target the schools where you're the people that you're wanting to, what's the word, I'm missing it at the moment.
That's all right.
That they become as well informed on the benefits of sport and recreation. That is the message. It's the message for normal able-bodied people and us ageing people who tell us we have to stay active and everything else, but it's very, very important for our children. And thank you all for a great presentation.
Well, thank you.
You can have me as a reference
I appreciate the compliments, and I think the panel do as well. But I never got to finish what I meant being Victoria the place to be. It is the place it is because of parents like yourself who have led the way and who have built this amazing foundation that we can build on. And so even the behemoth that is the NDIS was led by Bruce Bonahady, who's also a parent of 2 sons with autism. Amaze Autism Victoria was started by 4 parents. Bruce Bonahady's sons have cerebral palsy, sorry. Autism Victoria started by 4 parents. The Yellow Ladybugs started by a group of parents. The ICANN network, all of these amazing groups that exist in Victoria are user-led. And then as professionals, we have the privilege to come in and just keep working 9 to 5. But you're probably working at midnight, so thank you very much. And I do hope that we've been able to achieve something. I know in the sector for a long time we talk about how can we move from words towards actions. And I think that there's no greater action than when you actually have feet on the sand, and people who were hesitant to walk on the sand at first. They had sensory sensitivities, it was challenging, but a few weeks later or a year later they're jumping on the sand and running into the cold water in Williamstown. It's not the warmest.
And it has been cold.
I would like to take one more question and then we'll break, but we'll keep the room until 5:30 or whenever the last person leaves. So I feel like you can come and speak to the presenters. But one last question.
For those that
Laura?
want the slides, where and how will they be able to get a hold of them?
I was wondering if we could put the slides on the resources tab of AAA Play, but I need to ask you first.
We'll pop in the comments somewhere where people can get them later.
So I will either email the slides after each presenter has had the opportunity to remove any personally identifying information they'd like to, but then I'll be able to email the content to everybody. And I do think this is the start of a journey, certainly not the end. We would like to explore, should this information be included in something like a podcast so that we can reach people in Mildura as easy as Melbourne. So once again, oh, do you have a comment?
Just one more comment, just based on something I picked up before. I think for anyone going through the process, and with EV last year in terms of primary school funding, we went through the process where everything was actually focusing on the deficiencies. And you know that has to be done to be able to get you as much funding as possible, but it's extremely confronting and it's a very emotional time, and it's really, really hard to go through. But the flip side of that is, again, I obviously made the comment about the little nippers. Like, I was watching that thinking about how much Evie would love it. So all of these opportunities, again, that educational side of things, to be able to go, yeah, like these are the goals and these are everything that you're focusing on from that negative point of view, to be able to get the funding, flip it around, because these are all of the incredible opportunities that they are going to absolutely love, and how we focus on that side of things to bring it in to benefit.
Can I just make a comment on that?
Please.
This idea of the deficit and the strength, which I'm a long background in disability aged care and mental health psychiatry, like put it all in there. So we always did work on deficit-based basis, and it is more strength-based now. So I don't know if specifically they're telling you it should be a deficit, but it's just about how you think about something. So if for example, Evie getting up and being able to get to universal or swimming or dance means she needs to be toilet and she needs this and she needs this, all of those things are actually things that enable her to do those. So that's about strength. I can do this because I'm getting all of this. And that's really the change that came with how we had to do our, writing and assessments and how we word things. So
I completely agree with that, but I think that process to get to that and that level of understanding that this is all about how we can make things better for her and make her more independent and build her skills and her strengths, and is actually as a result of them not being where they would have been at otherwise. And that's fine, because everyone's different and we accept them for who they are and want to focus on the positives and all of that sort of stuff. But through that process, naturally there is that realization that can hit you pretty hard.
I think what's exceptional about sport and good coaches is that maybe it's not necessarily just a deficit or just a strength. It's just a true reflection of where people are at. And we're going to set the bar a little higher, and a goal might just be that they run on sand. I do think historically we were a deficits-based model, and the DSM, which we use for diagnosis, a lot of it is deficits-based, and you're right, I think it's 100% very confronting for parents when they have to maybe focus for funding purposes on the deficits, but every other day of the week, hopefully we focus on the amazing things the kids are able to do. There was one question at the back.
I was just going to add to that. I'm a physio and I do heaps of sport and rec stuff, mainly with younger kids, but 3 young adults. Look, this irks me as well, and I've got my way around it, is that although the strength is I'm able to walk with 2 hands held, for example, and that if it's a second plan and that's saying we achieve this goal of 2 hands held, I'm not able to walk on sand, and my goal is to be able to walk on sand. And so then I've got the strength, the deficit, and the goal, and I've been finding that coordinators, that early interventional, that LACs understand that because I set it out really clearly. But that's reflective of the way that families think things through and participants think things through. So instead of just writing a whole list, you can't do this, can't do this, can't do this.
Yeah,
Which is very, very confronting.
just to clarify that too, when they do the planning process, they have a series of checklists, the Pedicat and a number of other tools, and that's where, if we don't use deficit but use information and reality, that you won't focus on the word too much, because you really do need to understand what a real day is, rather than, oh, it's okay. It's actually, this is what happens in my day. And then out of that, they'll spit out a number, and that sort of sits up to what your funding will be. So don't focus too much on deficit as a process. It's actually, deficit is a process of how they assign their plan. But what you're talking about from a parent's point of view is fantastic, because that's the other end.
I do think something we need to keep advocating for, it's come up a few times, is more transparency. It's something that I'm involved in advocating for. A number of people said, oh, I was lucky that I got this from an LAC, and I was lucky that I got this checklist, and you need to know they use this. That stuff's not published and available on the website, and it ought to be. And if the criteria for how they determine, like I report against feasible and necessary because that's available, but other things aren't. And if it was all very clear, we could write our reports exactly against the criteria, everyone would know where they stand. So I think that's something that we need to keep asking for. It shouldn't be luck of, I happen to have a friend who used to be an LAC and I've got their checklist.
No, and
So there's some great resources out there. This is pre-planning, and go to the Early Childhood Intervention Vic TAS website, and a lot of those are there, or send me an email. I'm the resource king.
thank you. And I think on that note, I think I have kept everyone, my strength is that I'm laid back and I'm happy to go with things, and then my weakness is that I don't keep things to time. And so I should wrap it up. But I think that transparency is something that is needed, and that was a big goal of today, was to share stories. Not to say that everyone can get the exact same funding, because we know everyone is individual, but of course we do need to sort of share precedents and what's possible, and through parent-to-parent talk and professional-to-parent, professional-to-professional talk, this is how we learn more things and learn about the resources that are available and continue advocating for greater transparency. I would like to thank each speaker one more time for sharing their knowledge and insights today. Please take some food and feel free to hang out and chat and enjoy the rest of the day here. Thank you very much.